Now let's have a look on formal acceptance by the stakeholders. So formal project acceptance ensures that all of the deliverables meet the stakeholder expectations and contractual agreements. PMI highlights that without a structured acceptance, disputes and financial losses and reputational damage can occur. This is why engaging stakeholders early and setting clear acceptance criteria from beginning is essential. But why we need formal acceptance? Why it's so critical? So let's now understand what is the importance of having a formal project acceptance. Without a formal acceptance, the projects remain open-ended, leading to ongoing changes or resource constraints and legal risks. A structured acceptance process provides a clarity when the project is officially complete and avoids unnecessary extension. So again, why it's important? It's because it ensures a legal and contractual compliance, provides a financial closure and triggers the final payments, confirms that the project meets the business objectives, the stakeholders has no, let's say, additional requirements. Also, it prevents the scope creep or the last minute change request without following a change, let's say, without having a strict change control process. Here, let's look at the key processes that is involved in obtaining the stakeholder approval. So stakeholder approvals should not be last minute activity. By maintaining a continuous communication and regular review meeting, the project managers can streamline the financial acceptance process and prevent the delays. Here are some of these key steps that is involved when obtaining the stakeholder or the stakeholder acceptance uh, on these deliverables. First, you need to review the contractual requirement. After that, you need to validate the final deliverables. Once you validate the final deliverables, you need to engage the stakeholders to, let's say, to have a meeting or workshop just to obtain their acceptance and review their, let's say, the project deliverables where you have validated. After you confirm that all of these deliverables meet the stakeholder needs and expectations, now it's the time to obtain the formal sign off. After you obtain the sign off, you need to document these approvals and the closure details. What are the key documents that is required when having an acceptance process? So PMI highlights the importance of maintaining a structured documentation to prevent the legal and the contractual disputes. Using a standardized templates ensures the consistency and completeness in acceptance records. So these key documents include the final acceptance report, which confirms that the project meets the expectation or the requirements, or the deliverables meet these objectives of the project. We also need to have a sign off forms, and the sign off forms is like documents where the formal stakeholders sign. Uh, all of these stakeholders sign on their, let's say, expectation that were met as per the project delivery. One of also these key documents you might have is the quality and compliance report to ensure the regulatory requirements are met. You also can use a final performance metrics to capture the key success criteria. Addressing the outstanding issues before the closure. This is a very critical concept where we say that a structured issue resolution process is essential for the project or smooth project closure. EMI recommends maintaining an issue log to track all of the pending items and ensures that they are resolved before requesting the final approval. These common issues in the closing phase could be like the incomplete project deliverables or pending change requests that weren't assessed, evaluated, and implemented. sometimes the unresolved stakeholders concerns. So these are types of issues that you might face when trying to, let's say, to close the project, and there might be some pending issues that you need with. So again, it's very important to use an, let's say, a tracking system or an issue log to identify and track and resolve all of these outstanding issues before the project closure. Here are some of these best practices to get the formal acceptance document signed by the stakeholders. So best practices in project acceptance ensures the smooth and timely transition from execution to closure. PMI emphasizes a proactive stakeholder involvement and clear documentation as the key success factors. So these best practices includes engaging the stakeholders early to prevent any approval delays and let's say surprises. Um, you also need to define and communicate the acceptance criteria in the project charter when you start the project and you initiated the project. So all of these acceptance criteria are early defined to avoid any last minute surprises by the stakeholder not accepting the deliverables for not meeting their acceptance criteria or whatever quality criteria. So it's very important to have these acceptance criteria from beginning of the project initiation. May also use a standardized approval checklist to track the progress. Finally, you need to conduct a pre-acceptance, let's say, reviews to identify the gaps before the final sign off and try to resolve these before the sign off, let's say, process. There are some challenges that you as a project manager might face when trying to obtain these formal final acceptance. And these common challenges in obtaining the acceptance can be mitigated by setting clear expectations early in the project, as I mentioned, the acceptance criteria where you have defined it in the charter. EMI recommends defining a structured approval workflows and ensuring all of the stakeholders are aligned before requesting the formal sign-off. Some of these common challenges or barriers that you might face when trying to obtain the formal acceptance, including the last minute stakeholder objections. So, as I mentioned, you need to keep your stakeholder engaged regularly just to avoid these last minute objections by the stakeholders. You might also face some ambiguous acceptance criteria that the acceptance criteria were set by the stakeholders isn't smart, or we call it the smart goal. You cannot measure these acceptance criteria or it's not achievable. So it's very important when you establish the project and you set all of these goals and you set all of these acceptance criteria, it needs to be measurable, achievable, and time bound as per the goals. Also, the delayed approvals due the bureaucracy. So sometimes there are some delays that could happen from one of these stakeholders or unsatisfied stakeholders. So you need to always to stay on regular meetings and regular let's say feedback loop with the stakeholders to avoid these last minute approvals or delayed approval. Now let's look on finalizing the acceptance documentation. So maintaining a structured acceptance records is essential for the audits, the compliance, and the future references. And here PMI suggests using a digital document management system to track these and store the approvals securely. But exactly what should be included on the acceptance documentation? We talked about the having, let's say, the official acceptance signatures, the evidence of the deliverables were completed and transferred to the operation. Also, the compliance and quality assurance report to ensure meeting all of these requirements, the quality that were requested by the stakeholders. Lastly, also the financial closure records where you have finished all of these disputes, all of these bills, all of these, let's say, pending milestones. It's, let's say, completed successfully. You finalize all of these bills, This is part of the final acceptance documentation should. Now transitioning from the acceptance to the project closure. So a smooth transition from the acceptance to closure requires a careful planning and structured handover activities. PMI highlights the need for formal documentation like stakeholder communication and issue resolution before the project closure. The key transition activities here between the acceptance to move the project closure, including confirming all of the outstanding issues are resolved, ensuring all of the financial settlements are completed, there are no pending dispute between you or the procurement or vendor or the supplier. You need also to archive the project documentation for the future references. Finally, you need to communicate the closure to all of these stakeholders by maybe having conducting, let's say, yearly or quarterly or let's say monthly project closure committees or meetings to ensure that all of these stakeholders are aligned on the project's on the closure. And our final takeaways here from this session, we talked about the formal acceptance. We talked about it's important to ensure that the project is officially and professionally completed. We looked at the importance of keeping the stakeholder engaged to obtain, let's say, a timely feedback and to obtain the timely approvals. We looked at the structured documentation and what the acceptance, let's say, formal acceptance should contain, which helps you to prevent the legal and contractual issues later, and to keep the stakeholders informed and engaged when closing the project to ensure their satisfaction. We also finally talked about addressing the outstanding issues before the closure to prevent any future issues. So, this structured acceptance process ensures that all of the project deliverables meet the requirements and that stakeholders formally approve these deliverables or final results. PMI emphasizes that well documented and well communicated acceptance process prevent the disputes and financial losses and operational disruptions.